Hello friends, welcome to another episode of the Kawate Baptist Church Sunday School audio. If you're joining us for the very first time, you're welcome. We have been looking at the characters around the cross, and so far we've covered 4 characters, namely Simon Peter, Caiaphas the high priest, the Roman centurion, as well as Joseph of Arimathea. Today, we finish up with Simon of Cyrene. We are going to learn who Simon of Cyrene was and draw some lessons from his account. Are you ready? Let's dig in. Before we talk about Simon, I would like us to talk about providence. Quite a big word, right? We are going to talk about God's providence. This will help us appreciate the lesson as we finish it towards the end. What is God's providence? Well, when we talk about providence, we are talking about things that have to do with God controlling the events of our lives and everything else in His creation. It can be a very hard topic to understand, the one of providence, but we can know for certain that providence has to do with God's involvement, or governance if you like, in the order of things in the entire universe. Let's listen to this song that talks about God having the whole world in His hands. Wow, what a beautiful song. Now that we know a little bit about what God's providence is, let's learn about who Simon of Cyrene was. And as we go towards the lesson, we'll see how providence comes to play, and we'll be able to see what lessons we can learn from Simon of Cyrene. So, who was this Simon of Cyrene? Let's turn to the scriptures. Turn your Bibles with me to the book of Mark, chapter 15, verse 20, going down. It reads, "And when they had mocked him, they stripped him of the purple cloak and put his own clothes on him and led them out to crucify him. And they compelled a passerby, Simon of Cyrene, who was coming in from the country, the father of Alexander and Rufus, to carry his cross. And they brought him to the place called Golgotha, which means place of a skull. And they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it." We end at verse 24, which says, "And they crucified him and divided his garments among them, casting lots for them to decide what each should take." Let's now read from Luke chapter 23 and verse 26. It says, "And as they laid him away, they seized one Simon of Cyrene, who was coming in from the country, and laid him the cross, to carry it behind Jesus." So what can we see and learn of who Simon of Cyrene was from the scriptures we just read? Well, Simon was a man. He was a man from Cyrene, so that made him a Cyrenian, from a major city of a present-day Libya in northern Africa. Yes, he was African, just like you and me. He was an African Jew. A lot of Jews lived there in Cyrene. He had probably traveled to Jerusalem to attend the Passover feast and celebration at the temple. Many Jews made this journey at least once a lifetime. He must have saved up his money so he could make this long journey to Jerusalem. The long journey exposed a lot of these travelers to great dangers along the way. There were robbers, wild animals, and a lot of sicknesses, many things that they were exposed to. We also see that he was the father of Alexander and Rufus. We remember reading this from Mark chapter 15 verse 21. We will learn later on how these two sons were. We also see from Mark chapter 15 verse 21 that he was the father of Alexander and Rufus. We will learn later on how these two sons were. Moving on. So, what is the role that Simon of Cyrene played in Jesus' journey to the cross? Simon was entering the city and came into contact with the crowds and the commotion of the day as Jesus was fainting under the weight of his cross. It seemed like an accident that he arrived at this time of the day. Mark 15:21 records that he was picked out of the crowd by the Roman soldier and compelled to carry the cross of Jesus, who could not carry it any longer, because you remember, Jesus was so tired, he was so bruised carrying that cross, and so he was commanded by the Roman soldiers to carry the cross of Jesus. Mark 15:25 records that he was picked out of the crowd by the Roman soldier and compelled to carry the cross of Jesus, who could not carry it any longer. Remember, at the time that Jesus bore his cross, at this time Jesus was weak. He had been awake all through the night. He had not taken any food since the previous evening when he had the Passover meal with his disciples. He was arrested, he was mocked, he was spat on, flogged almost to death, and so in his dying state he could not carry that heavy wooden cross any further. So now Simon was compelled to carry the cross of Jesus. He was not a disciple of Jesus yet. He was actually pressed by the soldiers to carry the cross, and even if he wanted to get away, he could not. He humbled himself and carried the cross instead. You can imagine how he felt, traveling all those kilometers only to end up in activities he did not plan for. Simon carried the cross of Jesus to Golgotha. First, he was compelled to carry the cross, but he bore it willingly afterwards to the end of that journey to Golgotha. It's very possible that initially, even after being pressed, he may have said to himself, "I will carry this cross and leave immediately we reach the mountaintop." Instead, he dropped the cross as they reached the mountaintop and probably lingered on and witnessed what kind of a man this Jesus was. That he would even forgive those who crucified him, crying out, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing." It must have pierced Simon's heart and changed the course of his life. At this point, we must be able to recognize that God's providence was at work in Simon of Cyrene's situation. Remember we spoke about providence? Do you remember what providence is? God's providence? We say that God's providence has to do with God controlling the events of our lives and everything else in creation. As for Simon of Cyrene, he became a Christian. In all the situations that he went through during this time, he became a Christian. Let's read from Acts chapter 19, verse 33 to 34. It says, "Some of the crowd prompted Alexander, whom the Jews had put forward, and Alexander, motioning with his hand, wanted to make a defense to the crowd. But when they recognized that he was a Jew, for about 2 hours, they all cried out with one voice, 'Great is Artemis of the Ephesians.'" The mention of Simon of Cyrene's sons confirms that Simon of Cyrene became a Christian. These two men became very prominent in the church because of their father's conversion, which becomes a testimony to his household. Paul even spoke of Rufus's mother as his own. We see this in Romans chapter 16 verse 13. And Alexander is mentioned in Acts chapter 19, 33 to 34. In the book of Acts 11 to 20, Luke also gives prominence to the men of Cyrene. In Luke's account of foundation of the Gentiles Church of Antioch, a town where the disciples were first called Christians. So, Simon meeting the crowd was therefore not an accident. It was really a work of God's providence. As we come to a conclusion of today's lesson, it is very important for us to underline the fact that our personal encounters with God and our life experiences are also not an accident. You being able to listen in today's audio was certainly not an accident. Those who hear the word preached and get saved must remember it is God's providence working in their lives. God's name must surely be praised for who He is. Well, friends, that marks the end of our lesson today. It also marks the end of our series, Characters Around the Cross. It's been amazing to learn about the characters around the cross and what role they played on the cross. It is our hope and prayer that these lessons have been a life-changing experience for you who are not saved today. If you've missed out on some of the lessons regarding the characters around the cross, make sure to go onto the Kawata Baptist Church Biblical Christianity page, look for the sermons of the Kawata Baptist Church Sunday School audios, and catch up. From us, it's bye-bye until we meet again.